Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? So the Saints apparently have found their coordinator. Clint Kubiak, Adam Schefter had the report. Looks like that's the direction they're going. Can't be official until after the Super Bowl. And so they check that box. And the other part, though, of the offseason that continues is obviously how the Saints are going to get within cap compliance. They'll have to do their cap gymnastics as they do every year. There's some $80 million over the cap, so a lot of work to do. And we've already talked about Derek Carr as one of the players that's very likely going to get a contract restructure, as Luke Johnson reported. And I hate that. You know how I feel about it, but it's what it is. One of the other players that is going to be a really fascinating watch this year is Michael Thomas. And everyone is speculating about what's going to happen there, and I know ESPN had a feature on every team and what they have to do in this offseason. And one of the big questions is whether they're going to re-sign Michael Thomas. He's not technically a free agent because he's signed through 2024, but this offseason basically treats him as a free agent. So if he's on the roster the first day of the league year, then new guarantees will trigger. So they could likely designate him as a post-June 1 cut before that happens. So they could bring him back, but if they designate him as a post-June 1 cut, that means he'll be gone, and then it'll wipe that salary, and they'll save money this year. His cap hit, his dead cap hit, would essentially be cut in half, from about $18 million to $9 million, but that would get spread out over 2 years. So it'd be like $9 million this year, $9 million next year. Essentially, the Saints have to decide, do you want Michael Thomas back in New Orleans? And we talked about it earlier this week, and Kat Terrell was here with us, and her feeling was like, it feels like the writing is on the wall that he won't be back. And by the way, I agree with her. If you're Michael Thomas and you're out teeing off on your franchise, the quarterback, the organization, all on social media, it very much feels like you have one foot out the door already. So, if that's the case, then, okay, that's what it is. But I know there's this feeling among Saints fans, and part of me understands it, where you keep longing for Michael Thomas to revert to form, to have the type of season he had, maybe not in 2018 or 2019 when he had a record-setting season, but to the guy that could be a 100-catch guy, a 1,000-yard receiver, the guy who was on a Hall of Fame trajectory, a guy that won the NFL's Offensive Player of the Year award. But when I really look into Michael Thomas, though, at some point you have to ask the question, is the effort worth the payoff? And, I think, as I said, we've sort of married ourselves to this idea of what Michael Thomas was instead of accepting what Michael Thomas is. And think about that in the context of the conversation we've had with the Saints. The thing that I've said about this Saints organization is they are existing through the rear view instead of the windshield. They keep thinking about what was and what made them so great for a decade and a half and trying to get back to that instead of looking forward at what could be. And that's true with everything they've done, from promoting Dennis Allen and maintaining Pete Carmichael these past 2 seasons, and Mickey Loomis essentially having no accountability whatsoever and continuing to restructure deals and, as everyone says, kick the can down the road. It's all about how do we win now? And I understood that approach when you had Drew Brees and you were trying to get a championship before your Hall of Fame quarterback retired. But you didn't scale the mountain. Now you got a mountain of debt, and instead of living lean and paying off your debt, you keep applying for more credit cards. That's what the Saints keep doing. And Michael Thomas is the personification of that mentality. What was instead of what is and what will be. Do you realize that we have known Michael Thomas as an injury-prone locker room cancer for as long as we knew him as a dominant receiver? Do you realize this? He came into the league in 2016. For 4 years, Michael Thomas was among the best wide receivers in the NFL. For 4 years. 16, 17, 18, and 19, Michael Thomas was as good a receiver as there was in the National Football League. And in 2019 was the NFL's Offensive Player of the Year with 149 catches and 1,700 yards. But look at what has happened since then. You had 4 years of Michael Thomas as a dominant receiver, 16, 17, 18, 19. He played in 7 games in 2020, didn't play at all in 2021, 3 games in 22, 10 games in 23. You had 4 years of dominant Michael Thomas and 4 years of non-existent, injury-prone, cancer, locker room cancer, diva, all that stuff. And it's been 5 years now since you saw the dominant Michael Thomas. So what are you waiting on? To get a 30-year-old receiver healthy enough to be what? What version of himself will he be if he does stay healthy? Listen, I loved watching Michael Thomas the same way all of you did those first 4 years of his career. And I respect tremendously, seriously, I respect tremendously the fact that that dude had the type of injury he did in 2020 in the opener against Tampa. And instead of shutting it down, kept busting his behind to get back on the field, playing hurt. And everything that happened that offseason that cost him the entire 2021 season was massively disappointing, and we know it, and everything has lingered since. And I think Michael Thomas will be a Saints Hall of Famer one day and should be. But we have got to accept the fact that there are so many better options for this team than Michael Thomas, than 30, almost 31-year-old Michael Thomas, who hasn't played a full season in 5 years, who's disruptive in the locker room, who's bombastic on social media, taking shots at the quarterback, the ownership, the organization, the OC, everything. What kind of culture is that building? If you let him continue to get, this guy who hasn't been effective in 4 years, you let him continue to get away with it. It's time. And so when you see these mock drafts that come out and you see, guys, receivers mocked to the Saints at 14, it makes sense. We talked about one of them last week where Brian Thomas was mocked to the Saints at 14. Wouldn't you love to see a big 6'4", 210-pound athletic dude that can make catches over the middle and burn you deep? Who would you rather complimenting Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed next year? Brian Thomas or Michael Thomas? I know my answer, and it's easy. Give me the freak show on the rookie deal that's always put his head down and worked hard instead of the expensive veteran who can't stay healthy and is running his mouth. I am grateful for Michael Thomas for what he did the first 4 years. It was so much fun to watch. But again, are we trying to get back to what the Saints were? Or are we trying to get to what the Saints will or can be? What they were was a healthy Michael Thomas. I don't see this team, this organization, this franchise getting where they want to go with Michael Thomas again. At least not with him being he could be on the roster, but he's not going to be a significant part of it. So it's a tough decision to make because you know what he was. And this organization is so nostalgic. Because you spent 50 years as an awful franchise, and then you had this beautiful era, you put it on a pedestal and you keep trying to wrap yourself in it. Instead of, let's go build a new beautiful era. And I think it's going to be one without Michael Thomas. But that's going to be one of the huge free agent decisions, maybe the free agent decision they have to make this offseason. Michael Thomas and Jameis Winston. What happens with those two guys? That's really where the list starts and stops for this team this offseason. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.